Hollywood is locked in its biggest standoff in decades. Actors went on strike nearly 2 weeks ago, joining the writers who've been on the picket line since early May. Aside from better pay and working conditions, artists are demanding certain guarantees for their work in streaming platforms. Edit's Tianshan has more.
Eric Pasoja is an actor who's been in the movie business for over 3 decades. He's been on the picket lines ever since the Actors Union SAG-AFTRA made the decision to strike earlier this month, following disagreements with major studios over a number of issues like pay, working conditions, and residuals.
Residuals are payments for the reuse of a person's voice or likeness. And they're important because they sustain actors and people in many different industries through times when they're not working. There's intermittent work. But the fact is they're still using our faces, and we need to get paid for that.
As a passive income, residuals are considered critical for many actors who often do not have a consistent monthly income. Those payments can be substantial for shows on a traditional broadcast or cable network, but on streaming platforms taking over an ever larger share of the market in recent years, residuals are calculated much differently and most often work out to a tiny fraction of what the networks pay.
I definitely felt the pinch. I was actually one of the first because the show WandaVision was the first of the streaming. So we saw firsthand before everybody else did the injustice. You know, the lack of pay, so we literally saw that first, and we couldn't explain it to people because everyone was so used to the old way of residuals.
Actors noticed residuals disappearing in recent years, but it wasn't until the latest round of contract negotiations that they used their collective voice to demand changes.
I go on the SAG-AFTRA website and look in the residuals section every single day. My family's future and present depend on residuals. So it's integrally involved with what we do. When I'm not working, it's really nice to have a check coming in.
Negotiators from the Actors Union say studios have not even shown willingness to engage in a discussion over the issue of residuals, which many actors and writers here say they heavily rely on if they're to remain a part of the Hollywood industry. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
For more on the actors and the writers' strike, we turn to Kevin Klowden, Chief Global Strategist at the Milken Institute. Good to see you, my friend. When we first started talking about this, I believe it was right when the writers had gone on strike and then the actors went on strike. And the question we were asking is, well, how long might this last? And we were surmising it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. And here we are. It's been 2 weeks and 2 months for the writers. And I don't think that I've seen anything that shows that the negotiations have come any closer.
No, I don't think they have. I think you're very much right. It looks like it can go on for a while.
What could change the scenario? I mean, at some point, the studios have to make content, right? We know that. Maybe not this month or next month, but eventually they have to get back to work. The actors, they need to get paid too, and the writers and all the support staff. I mean, the whole apparatus of the entertainment industry does very much depend on them actually going back to work. This cannot keep lasting past the end of this year.
No, and honestly, it can't really keep lasting through the end of the summer and into the fall. There's a point at which you not only impact whatever is going to be shown on a network television, but the really dangerous part is that you start losing out on content to release in the movie theaters. And no matter how much the studios view streaming as essentially the now and the future, the cash flow that comes from movie theaters, the cash flow that comes from other forms of broadcast and cable and otherwise are still really significant, and feeling the pinch there is definitely going to be an issue.
Now, just for our audience, not all actors in the country are part of the union, right? We're talking about 2 very specific unions here. That said, do you think what we're watching here makes the union stronger in a sense that shows that they're united with the writers? Or does it show that they're weaker when it comes to negotiating because they clearly could not get to a deal? And I'm sure both parties are to blame in large part, but there is a public perception here as well.
Well, the answer is that you're right. It's both. It's hard saying that. It's hard imagining that. But the fact is that everyone is weakened by an extended strike. It's not just the producers. It's not just the unions. It's everyone. And everyone in Hollywood and the unions who are not taking part. So the Teamsters, the IATSE, the various others who are involved, they're all impacted. You know, all the secondary and support industries are impacted, and it affects everybody and brings everybody down. But at the same time, you've got a situation where the pandemic essentially convinced the studios that the future was in streaming, but also at the same time, especially given the long hours and the extra work that the actors and the writers and everybody else put in trying to recover from the pandemic, made them extremely aware of just how precarious their own economic circumstances were and why things need to change. And that has strengthened the hand of the unions, but it's also created a situation where neither side really fully understands the economics involved. There's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of understanding of what the real numbers are. And so there's a lack of trust. Without any kind of trust, it's very hard to hit a middle ground in terms of negotiations.
You look at the stocks of Paramount, Disney, Warner Brothers, and they're all saying the same thing, is that their profit margins have been, I don't want to say hurt, but they're not as robust as they used to be, in part because there's a lot more competitors in the space from the streaming folks like Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. And in that story with Edits Tianshan, we talked specifically about one of the key sticking points is should and how much should actors get when they produce content that's actually streamed? What should the solution be?
Well, there has to be some sort of payment for the continued use of somebody's likeness. That's a very old, time-honored tradition that you've had in Hollywood. Certainly, it's that kind of understanding. You know, you go back to the major 1960 strike, which is the last time you had the writers and actors both go on strike, and the understanding and the agreement of residuals that came out of that also paved the way in many ways for movies to be shown on television, for laying a lot of the groundwork for the kind of the entertainment industry we see today that came out of that agreement. And the problem is that if you work a certain amount of time in Hollywood and you basically work extended hours, you do all that, you expect to have some control over your image, your likeness. That's not just unique to Hollywood, that's anybody in entertainment and artists and various others. And so the concern is if you concede that entirely, that you economically don't really recover and you lose your leverage and you lose your ability to manage that. And the other thing is that if you can digitally capture and control somebody's image, that what people are afraid of is they stop being unique. Their image can then get inserted in other productions.
Right. It is
other places.
It is obviously complicated, but we certainly see the point from where the actors are coming from is they want to get compensated for their use of likeness or their actual work. Kevin, really appreciate you on this complex topic. Certainly the economy of not just Los Angeles, but much of the country depends on this. Thank you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.